What's going on, everybody? Hope your day is going good. Hope your evening is going good. Whatever time it is, wherever you're at, thank you for tuning in as always. And special shout out to my dad. Today he turned 65, August 26th. So major salute to him. He's up in Dayton right now, but I'm in Houston. So I'm going to be getting some work done instead. But I just want to shout him out first before we got started. I'm currently working with a third-party application called Nakama, which is essentially a complete online backend for whatever application that you're working with. And if you're not privy to the game I made a couple months ago called Gift Grab, which was about Santa grabbing as many gifts as he could within a time frame while dodging ice blocks and collecting power-ups, I thought it'd be a good idea to add a third-party backend that would kind of push the boundaries of what the game actually does itself. So now I'm going to be incorporating user authentication so that we know who's actually playing the game, and then a leaderboard. That way we can see who had the most gifts collected in that time frame. So that's what this video will be about, the Nakama third-party application and how to use user authentication and leaderboards to incorporate into our game and make it a little bit more pleasurable and a better user experience. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so as far as shout outs go, there wasn't too much documentation on Nakama usage on YouTube, at least. The only videos that I saw were from a channel called Heroic Labs, and they're the people who actually make Nakama itself. So they were more like just straight tutorials from the company that made the product. But they were a good resource nonetheless. So as always, be sure to check them out. They go into the usage of Nakama way deeper than I will in this video, but just as reference, they're good for getting a better understanding of how this implementation will work. So we're going to be doing 4 specific tasks for this demonstration, and I'll break it up into pieces so that it's a little bit easier to digest, so to speak. First thing is we're going to be configuring and building the Nakama server, and that server is going to give us the access to these APIs that we need for the game. The server is also going to be ran locally on this machine. Once it needs to go to production, then we could push that server to the cloud, but for this demonstration, that's not necessary. So the server will be ran locally on this MacBook. The next thing that we need to do is run the server via Docker. And Docker is going to create a container, which is essentially an environment for us to run this server in. Then we need to implement the new UI in Flutter. So the user authentication screen as well as the leaderboard screen will all be new UI components within the Flutter app. And then finally, we're just going to test the application, make sure that once a user logs in, they create an account, make sure that once they complete a game, that their best score is logged to the Nakama server. So that's essentially the 4 components for this video today. Configure and build a Nakama server, run that Nakama server via Docker, create the new UI within Flutter, and finally test the application. So like I said, first step is configuring and building the Nakama server. We're going to be using a language called Go. This is actually my first time writing Go. So when building the server, I'm not going to type out all the code. Some of it I may copy and paste, like the heavy, like Docker files and Go files that are very intricate. I'm going to copy and paste those, but I will be explaining them so you understand how they work. But just to make sure that any inconsistency isn't a detriment to making the server, I'm going to save us some time by copy and pasting just a few of those files. So I'm in the Gift Grab application right now. One thing to make sure we have is make sure you have Docker installed, and I'll drop a link to that as well. But this is Docker for desktop. We have no containers as of right now. We also need to make sure that we have Go installed for our machine. For this project, I believe I'm using version 120. Yeah, I'm using 120. So I'm on a Mac, so you can download the installer for Mac. If you got Windows or Linux, then you would download those. But make sure you have Go version 120 installed on your machine. So we got Docker and Go installed. Now we need to go ahead and make this API. So I'm going to make a new folder called API, and within here we're going to run go mod init, and we're essentially creating a Go module for the application. So we'll call it Heroic Labs / gift grab. All right, it says creating new Go mod, module, Heroic Labs, gift grab. Just make sure that it's some type of path specified name. From there, we need to fetch the package for using Nakama in Go. So we use a term called go get, github.com/heroic labs/Nakama common/runtime. All right, so we got the package installed. Now, if we come to the API, we'll see that we have these two files, go.mod and go.sum. Added in the go.mod, something to keep in, or something to make sure that you're cognizant of, is the packages that you are requiring for the Go module have to be built with the same version that Go was built with itself. So I ran into errors where using these versions 1.2.8.1 and 1.31.0, it didn't allow the application to build once I got to the actual stage of building the container in Docker. So we're going to change these versions to ones that actually do work, which is version 1.27.0 and version 1.28.1. Okay, so now we're going to create a new file called main.go for our module. I'm going to paste this in here, but essentially we are doing a few things. We're importing the packages we need for this module, which is context, database, SQL, time, and then the package for Heroic Labs, like I talked about earlier. And this method right here, which is called init module, which takes a context, a logger, database, a Nakama module, and an initializer with a return type of error if there is one. So what we're doing in here is we're creating a instance of the current time when the init module starts, and we're assigning to a variable called init start. Then we have some fields here that we're going to use for creating our leaderboard in Nakama. Something to keep in mind is leaderboards can only be created through the server. I thought that there was some type of front-end API on the Flutter side that allowed you to do that. They don't have that implementation here yet. I don't know if they plan on doing that, but just keep in mind, if you want to create a leaderboard, that is something that you have to do on the server. So here are the fields. We have an ID, which specifies the ID of our leaderboard. We're going to call it weekly leaderboard. Authoritative is false. So what this means is if authoritative is true, then only the server can make changes to the data or send API requests. So if it's true, that means only the server is allowed to update the leaderboard, but we want to be able to update it on the front end in the Flutter app. So we're going to set this as false. The sort order is descending, so highest score to the lowest score. Operator best, this means that the best score will be logged to the leaderboard. There's 4 settings in total. There's best, there's set, which means that we're going to set the score no matter if they do better or worse. There's increment, which means every game that they play, we're going to be incrementing the score by that score that they got in the game. And then decrement, which does the same thing in reverse. But since this is a high score leaderboard, we only want the best score, so we'll have this operator set the best. The reset schedule, this is syntax for cron jobs, but this is essentially meaning that the leaderboard will refresh on a weekly basis. And then metadata, which we don't need right now, but if you wanted any type of extra data passed into the leaderboard when they set their score, you would do that here. Then within here, we are calling that Nakama module and calling leaderboard create, passing in all those parameters. And then if there is no error, we keep going. If there is, then we log that error. Finally, we print out how long it took to load this module, which isn't too important, but that's just what's in here just for, I guess, debugging purposes. So that's the main.go file. That's all we need for creating the leaderboard for our server. Then we need to actually fetch these packages. So we first need to get the Heroic Labs /gift grab package. So we'll call go get Heroic Labs /gift grab. And then we need to call go mod vendor, which is going to create this vendor directory with the packages that we need for this application right here. Next, we need to create a local YAML file. We're going to specify the logger here. The level will be debug. Then we need to create the Docker file. This Docker file is going to allow us to create the image that will build the container that runs our environment. So we'll create new file. All Docker files are called Docker files, so it's easy to remember there. And this is the Docker file for building the image that we need for the application. So something to note here is from allows us to define the base image. So we're going to be using the Nakama plugin builder. env are some environment variables that will be running on our server. The work directory is where we will be sending subsequent requests for the following commands that are run in this Docker file. We have copy, which is basically copying the local directories to our container when we need it later. So those are the keywords here, and there's a plethora of other ones as well. But just know that that is what we're doing here. We're running a command that's going to create, build our container essentially, and it's going to be output as a backend.so. And then we're going to copy that into our Nakama data modules later on. But this is all backend stuff, not super important. And I'm pretty new with Docker files, but this is the Docker file for making that image. And last but not least, oops, not a folder. We need to create a Docker compose.yaml file. And this is a lot right here, but it's going to be creating two services, which are the images within our container, and just information related to one service is for Postgres, which is the database. Another service is for Nakama, which is the server itself, or what the API that we need for this entire application. But we're going to be naming both these images template NK Postgres and template NK Backend. And that's all we need to do as far as creating the files. Okay, now it's time to actually run the Nakama server. So we already have it configured on the back end. I'm going to go ahead and close out some of these windows, and all we're going to do is run a simple command called docker compose -p to specify the name of the container that we want it to be called, and I'm going to call it give grab API. Then we specify up -- build, and now it's going to be now it's working to create our container that's running our server. Usually takes around 40 seconds, somewhere around there. So I'll be back in 1 second. All right, it says startup done right here. So if we come over to Docker, you can see we now have a new container called give grab API. Those two images or services that were created, the template NK Postgres and template NK Backend, were built successfully. Now we can actually open up our server. Whoops, not that one. We need to show all ports. We're going to open up this localhost :7351, and this is the Nakama console. So the username is admin, password is password, and then we'll log in. So this is the console. Has a lot of useful information here. Mainly what we're focused on is the accounts, which are the user accounts that have been authenticated, and the leaderboard that we wanted to create as well. We have our weekly leaderboard with all the specifications that were in that main.go file. But there's a bunch of other things such as groups, storage, chat messages, matches, etc., etc. But as you can see, our server is now running. So now what we can do is hop over to the Flutter side and actually build out this application and the new screens. So we got our server running how it needs to. Now it's time to go ahead and jump over to the Flutter side, which is my favorite side to be on, and create these screens as well as some of the providers and services that we need to get the data. So we can close out this API folder. I'm actually going to just open up a new terminal. And first we are going to head over to our lib directory, and a new approach I've had with designing is actual good architecture. So I'm breaking these files down into three layers, data, domain, and presentation. So data layer is going to be the layer that's responsible for the services that get our data. Providers are going to be the ones that kind of act as repositories and hold the data or access those services from the data layer. And then the presentation layer is the actual widget itself that we use for displaying the screens and everything that's on the front end side visually. So I'm going to create this domain folder real quick just so that we have it. But we're going to go to our constants, to the screens, enum, and I'm going to add one for login because we're going to be creating this login screen first. So we'll add that. Something I want to keep in mind as well is for this new feature that we're adding, we need to add the Nakama package, Flutter package version 0.1.6, as well as Flutter RiverPod 2.3.6. Flutter RiverPod is what we'll be using to use RiverPod as our state management package, and it's going to give us the providers that interact with the services. So just download those two packages, nothing too major. Make sure that you get that saved and do a Flutter pup get so that you can use them in the app. So we have our login enum. Now I'm going to go over to the main menu screen, actually the actual screen, not the game. Go to presentation, screens. Actually, I can go ahead and run this app as well. Let's open up a simulator. All right, we'll be running on an iPhone 14 Pro Max. All right, let me go ahead and we can just start running this while we're working on it. But we want to go over to the main screen, main menu screen, and we're going to be changing this logic because in the game currently, we go to the home screen and then we just hit play and start the game. Actually, I can just show this now if it loads up. So right now we have the GIF grab game and a play button. That's all it does right now. but we want to have the login screen be the first screen that displays. In here on the button for play, instead of, actually I don't need to do anything to this menu just yet. Actually, I don't need to do anything just yet. I'm just going to leave this play button empty, just so we don't start the game or anything like that. But we're going to create the login screen. Within here we have initial active overlays. We're going to change that from main to login, and then create an overlay builder map entry for the login screen. So screens.login will map to the login screen. We haven't created that yet, but I'll go ahead and create that in screens right now, just as a placeholder. Login screen.dart. And we're going to copy the main menu into that login screen and just make some changes. So call this login screen, then main.dart. We'll do the import to get that new widget. What we're going to change the login screen is we'll change the name from gift grab to login. So let's see what that looks like right now. Okay, we got login. I'm going to actually split that like this. So now we have the game on the left side, and shrink this down a little bit. Okay, so in between the login and play button, we're going to have the text form field where the user can enter the username that they'll be using. So kind of like in normal high scoring games, you enter like 4 characters. So that's the vision that I have here, is adding like, you know, what are your 4 initials or whatever for your high score. So we'll specify a padding, edge insets dot all, do 16. Then we need to specify the child, which will be the text form field. Oops, we don't need autocorrect. All right, save that and get rid of that comma. Save that. All right, we got our text field right here. Then we want to just add a few specifications to the text form field. Text align, we want to be text align center. Max length will be 4 because we only want 4 characters at most. We want to also make it so that as they type, it goes to uppercase. So we're going to use an input formatter. All right, we're going to be using a text formatter that is in the util directory that I forgot to mention earlier, but I forgot to do a git pull. But this input formatter class is something that I saw online, but it essentially is a text input formatter that forces each character inputted to be uppercase. So we'll be using that for our input formatters right here, uppercase text formatter. So now when we type, you see there's always capital, no matter if we have caps on or not. Then for the style, want the text to be pretty big. So we'll set the font size to 128, which is pretty massive, but it's visually appealing. So now, there we go. Then we got to spice this up a little bit by adding a decoration, specify box decoration. We want the border to have some spice, and we'll specify outline input border, border radius circular, make it about 15. Can't be assigned with the parameter input decoration. Oh, input decoration, not box decoration. All right, now we have a border around our text form field, which is good. Let me add a const up here. We also want the field param to be true, and the field is what is essentially the content inside the text form field. So we want to dim that just a little bit by specifying the field color, which will be black with the opacity of very light 0.1. Oops, not opacity, with opacity. All right, let's see what 0.1 looks like. All right, cool. So we got the little black dim in the back. Perfect. So got that looking good. All we need to do on the login screen. Now let's create the service for logging in, and we'll come to the data layer, go to services, new file, Nakama service.dart. Close this out. Class Nakama service, and within the constructor, we're going to be setting the client based on the URL, SSL, server key, and the port. So we'll call get Nakama client. Within here, host, well, I gotta do the import first. Import Nakama. Host is going to be locally, so 127.0.0.1. SSL is false. Server key is going to be default key. And then the port, HTTP port, is 7531 or 7351. Good so far. Create a Nakama auth class that will be holding the services for authentication. So class Nakama auth. First method is going to be a helper method called authenticate email. We're making a helper method because later on I'll be using that same method to create a user as well as just authenticate them. So this will be the helper one. So it returns a session. We're going to call it Authenticate Email, and it's going to require a few params. First is email, password, optional username, so we'll make it nullable, and then a Boolean of if we are creating this account or not. It's async, and since this is the helper method, we'll put the try catch in here. I think it's good practice, I don't know, but I assume that it's good practice to put the try catch at the the deepest part of where a function can be called, which is within this helper method of the service. So if there's an issue, we'll just throw an exception E. Otherwise, we're going to perform our logic. So what we need to do is we're going to get a session object. We'll call it the get Nakama client, then call the method authenticate email, await this because it's asynchronous, and we've already passed in the email and password by default, but then we'll also pass in that username as well as that create param. Then down here, we'll just print out the user ID of the session that was just logged in, or that was just authenticated. Nakama UID session.user ID. And then finally, we return the session. I need to import this from material. Okay, now we need to create the actual method for creating the user. So I'm going to copy and paste this because it's very similar. This will be called create email, and we don't need this create value. Also, that won't be nullable because since we know we're creating, we're going to ensure that it's non-nullable. So down here, instead of calling the get Nakama client, we're going to just call that method authenticate email, and for create, we'll pass in true. Also, we'll take this out of the try catch block and get rid of this as well. We got our service for authentication added, and add an instance of that to our service. Nakama auth equals Nakama auth. Cool. So now whenever we call the service, we call Nakama service.auth.create email. Now we need to create the provider, which acts as, like I said earlier, kind of like a repository for the service that holds the data. So within the domain layer, we'll create providers folder and create a Nakama provider.dart class Nakama provider extends change notifier. Call it instance of the Nakama service up here, Nakama service. And then we're also going to have a session variable that we will hold within the provider that's going to represent when it's going to hold our session information after we authenticate successfully. Let me import this. Then finally, within the provider, we're just going to have a constructor that's going to print out when this provider has been created. Nakama provider created. Cool. Also need a providers class that's going to hold all of our providers. Call this class providers. Let's see, static final ref equal provider container. Now this ref variable will allow us to access the Nakama provider from anywhere, but normally what we want to do is turn all of our stateless and stateful widgets into consumer widgets, which are from RiverPod, and they give you a reference to use within the build function, so you wouldn't need ref, but this is kind of like a workaround if you want to do it in other areas. So we'll have one called static final Nakama provider equals change notifier provider, and then we'll return Nakama provider. And we probably need to import that. Also, since we're using RiverPod, we have to ensure that we wrap the material app within a provider scope widget. Provider scope, and the child will just be that material app. Otherwise, you won't be able to use RiverPod as your state management. We go back to the login screen. We're ready to use our provider for authenticating the user. So within login screen, we will turn the stateless widget into a consumer widget, and it gives us the widget ref that we'll use to get our provider, and we'll call Nakama provider equals ref.watch providers dot I think I got the wrong providers in here. Let me see. I didn't get the full one yet. Providers.Nakama provider. Let's see, what's the issue? Oh, I didn't import that. Should be good now. Okay, cool. So we got our Nakama provider. Whoops, shouldn't have hit save. Let me refresh that because we just created a new provider and didn't have it loaded properly. Okay, we got the Nakama provider, and we're going to change this title to submit. And within here, we're going to make it async because we're going to be doing some asynchronous calls. But first, we just want to get the username from the text controller. So I need to create that actually. I'll do that right now. Final text editing controller equals text. Let's see, editing controller. Apply this controller to the text form field. So now we can take the value from that controller and assign it to a variable called username. Then within here, we call the Nakama provider auth. Oops. Oh, actually it's not auth. It's just create email. So we'll do that right here. Future create email. It's going to take in same params that the service takes in username, or I'm sorry, email, password, and username. Asynchronous modifier. Here's where we will get a session variable similar to the service equals, we're going to call the Nakama service auth dot create email, await this. And if everything goes smooth, then we set the session that we have up here to be that session that we just got from logging in. Okay, good. Now we come back to the login screen, and now we can call that method create email. The email is just going to be the username that they pass in. Username, we don't need the brackets actually. Username at gmail.com. Password, we'll just say password, and the username will be the username. Now, this is a very hacky way to get unique emails. Obviously, you would want to take in a user's actual email, not just a username, because this can obviously create duplications quite easily, but just for demonstration purposes, this is the approach we'll be taking. So we'll await this. The user is able to log in successfully. Then we're going to remove a menu. We're going to actually add a menu or add a screen, and we're going to be going to the main screen, and we're going to remove the login screen because we're logging in. Remove menu, screens, login. And these add and remove menus are something that I created in the game breath itself. It just adds whatever enum that we specified to the overlays property for the overlay builder map. So after successful login, we're going to leave the login screen and go into the main page. I have something wrong here. Oh, gotta take that const off. So if we refresh this and try it out, we should get some user accounts in our console. So right now we don't have any accounts, but let's create one right now for Trey and then hit submit. Unauthenticated. Okay, let's see. So I figured out what was the issue for the unauthenticated error. I had to specify a different port. So instead of 7351, we're doing 7350. So now if we refresh this over to the login screen, type in Trey and then hit submit, you'll see that we now go to the main screen, and we've also created a new user with this user ID right here. And if we come to the console, we can now see that Trey was authenticated into our app. So let's try this with a few more accounts. We'll do Jack and do shout out sis. Submit that. All right, now we should see accounts for Trey, Bree, and Jack. So the user authentication is working good. Now, once the user's logged in, we want them to be able to use the leaderboard as well as create a record for the leaderboard. So to add another screen, we're going to do what we did before. We're going to go back to our constants file and add a new enum called leaderboard. And then we're going to modify the main screen, the screen that is shown when the user first log in. We want to add a leaderboard button. So we have the play button that's going to start the game, but then we want to add another button. So we'll do this. We're going to add some space in between the buttons first. So size box of 20. Then specify another button. We'll log in so that we can see what this looks like. So, all right, 2 play buttons, but we want one for leaderboard, and we'll leave that empty for right now. And then we also need a back button just in case they want to essentially log back out and enter as a new user. So I have a back button, and within here, we're going to add menu, and we're going to be adding the login screen back and removing the main screen. All right, so if we hit back, oh, we refreshed it. Login is Trey. All right, we're on the main screen, hit back. We can log in again as someone else. All right, so that's good. Now for leaderboard, we need to add a leaderboard screen reference within our game widget. So we'll copy and paste the same one for login name. We're going to map it to the leaderboard screen, which we don't have yet, but we'll have that in a second. Leaderboard screen, and I'll make that generic screen right now. Leaderboard screen.dart, leaderboard screen, and then we'll do our import within the main.dart file. Okay, got that in there. Close some of these out. Then, as we did for authentication, we need to update our Nakama service to have a leaderboard. So we have I'm going to copy and paste this because there's a lot of similar logic. But we have Nakama auth. Now we need Nakama leaderboard, and then up here we'll create another instance similar to the Nakama auth. We'll have one for Nakama leaderboard. All right. Then down here, oops. So we're actually going to be creating, I'm gonna just use this as a model to make the other method, but we're gonna have two methods for the leaderboard. One is creating a leaderboard record. So when they complete the game, their record is stored. And then a method for listing the leaderboard record so that they can view all the records on the current leaderboard. So the first one is going to be called write leaderboard record, and that's going to return a leaderboard record, write leaderboard record. That is going to take a required session as well as the score of that record that the user is trying to submit. So we'll do our import here. We have a import issue because session is a part of two different packages, one api.pb.dart and the other one from Nakama. So what we can do is we can paste in the Nakama session directly and use a prefix called Nakama session. So now we'll just prefix all our session uses with this prefix, so that way we can get past this this issue. That should solve the problem. Okay. Okay. So within here, we're going to have a leaderboard record variable called leaderboard record. We're going to get that await because it's asynchronous. Oops. Let me add the async modifier to this method. Await, we're going to get that Nakama client again, and then call the method write leaderboard record. We're going to be passing in that session, and then the leaderboard ID, which we can just create within this leaderboard class, static const string leaderboard ID, which is going to be what we specified for our leaderboard here, which was weekly leaderboard. And then we'll pass in that leaderboard value. Whoops. Pass that in here. Perfect. And then we're going to return the leaderboard. And I'm going to wrap this in a try catch because this is the bottom of our service where this will be called. So try catch, throw exception E, and hope for the best. All right, so we have the first method done, the write leaderboard record. Now we want one for listing the leaderboard records. And we'll call this list leaderboard record, and it's going to return a list of leaderboard records. And the only thing that's needed for this method is the session itself, because we don't need a score. We're returning all the leaderboards. So we'll call same thing, get in the Nakama client, list leaderboard records, take out that leaderboard ID, and I believe this returns a different object than what you would expect a leaderboard record list. That's right. So we'll return the leaderboard record list, but on that leaderboard record list are the records, and those are the list of leaderboard records that we need. Leaderboard records. All right, and then we'll just return those leaderboard records. So let's see, leaderboard name. Oh, and it also needs a leaderboard name passed in, which is going to be, I don't know why it's leaderboard name for list leaderboard record method, and then it's leaderboard ID for write leaderboard record, but just know it's the same thing. Okay, so we got the Nakama service updated. Now we need to add those methods to the provider. Oops, not the provider, the Nakama provider more specifically. All right, so we have create email, and we're going to create the method for returning the leaderboard record for creating one, write leaderboard record, and that'll be called on leaderboard, and call the method write leaderboard record. So we need to be passing in essentially the same thing for the service, passing in a session. Okay, all we need is a session. Required session. We're probably going to have to do that prefix name thing here as well. Let's do our imports. Yeah, I think that's the issue. So we'll grab that, bring it over here, make sure to preface the session usage with that prefix. All right. Now write leaderboard needs, actually, it's not returning a session. It's returning a leaderboard record. Leaderboard record. Session is going to be that session from that's being passed in. So I think this is accurate. Oh, and we need the score too. So we'll pass that in. Required int score. And then finally, we just return that leaderboard record. Now, there's a lot of data that comes on the leaderboard record. We won't really need it being returned when we create a leaderboard record, but just know that you can use that if you wanted to display something to the user after they finished a match or something like that. Oh, That should work. Leaderboard record. Oh, I'm not returning a leaderboard record. There we go. Okay, now we need one for getting the leaderboard records into our provider. Same thing, list leaderboard record. I'm going to call this list leaderboard records for consistency. Okay. Leaderboard records, we only need the session, don't need a score. So we'll take that score out. And this is returning a list of leaderboard records. All right, got that all in there. Provider and services are good. We can come over to the game over screen where we will actually call the provider to submit the leaderboard record. So we'll turn this to a consumer widget as before, do our import, add the widget ref here. I'm gonna copy and paste this from the login screen just to save a little bit of time. Import it. All right, we have the Nakama provider within our game over screen. Now we want to call a method called, we'll call leaderboard first. Write leaderboard record, I'm sorry. Write leaderboard record. I'm trying to think, I don't need that. I don't need a session on the write leaderboard record. No. Wait, do I? Oh, wait. Within our service, within our provider, we're going to be checking. We don't need a session because we're checking to make sure that the session isn't null. If session equals null, which it shouldn't, that means that the user hasn't been authenticated yet, then we'll throw an exception. User session not yet set. Okay, and take out that session. And then same thing for here. Just make sure that the session is set. It should work. Oh, and then add the exclamation point because we shouldn't make it this far if the session is null. Okay, that should be good for the provider. Identifier, record list. Oh, and we don't need any params for list leaderboard records. That's right. Okay, now if we come back over to the game over screen, write leaderboard record, the only thing that's needed is the score. So we'll just do gameref.score. So everything is in place now. So let me save this. So now when we play the game, let me make sure that we're navigating to the game once we hit play. We're actually not going anywhere right now. So what we want to do is gameref dot remove menu, which is going to be this main one, and then we're going to do gameref dot resume engine because we're starting the game. All right, so now let's see what this looks like now. Login is Trey, and I'm gonna have the terminal up just in case there's any errors. Login is Trey. All right, then we hit play. All right, so now we're gonna play the game. All right, game over, score 17. We should have a new record on our leaderboard. Trey, score 0. It didn't put the score in though. Let me see, there's probably something missing from the service. I passed in the score to the right leaderboard record, score. There's something in this service then. Oh, here we go. Passing the score right here. I didn't add it to the service. That should be a required field. I'm not sure why it's optional. All right, let's try this again, but we're gonna log in with Sis and see what her score is gonna be. So let's play this again. All right, game over. Bree did obviously much better than I did, score 20, but now we should see a record in here with 20. So right now Bree's leading by default with a score of 20. So that's good. Last thing that we need to do is actually add the leaderboard that's going to display all the records in the game. So we're going to create a new screen called leaderboard. Oh, actually, I already have that. I'm sorry, we don't need this again. Come over to the leaderboard screen, change this to leaderboard, and we'll make this a consumer widget, widget.ref. Copy this from the login screen as before. Do our imports. All right, we'll refresh that. Let's see what this looks like so far. Oops, not going anywhere. Oh, let's modify the main screen to go to the leaderboard when they select it. Gameref.add menu screens.leaderboard and remove the main screen. All right, let's try this again. So we're on the leaderboard screen. Leaderboard screen does not need all these buttons though. So it only needs a back button really. So we'll take out the play button and the leaderboard button. All right, perfect. So, oh, and when we hit back, we want to add the main screen and remove leaderboard. Very tedious navigation, but it all works. So now we go to leaderboard, back. All right, that's working. Now let's update this leaderboard screen to show the leaderboard records. I'm gonna make an expanded widget here that's going to fill up the rest of the screen. And we're going to use a future builder of type list leaderboard record. And the future will be the Nakama provider calling the list leaderboard records method. Let's see. List leaderboard record. Oh, and now we need to create the builder, which is going to be actually, what does the builder take? Oh, context and snapshot. That's right. Okay. So first thing that we need to do within here is make sure that the connection state is not waiting. So if snapshot dot connection state equals connection state dot waiting, then we're going to return a center widget with a circular progress indicator. Now I'm going to add the const modifier here. There's going to be an else if the snapshot that has an error, then we're going to return that error just in the text field. Snapshot.error.toString. Okay. Another else if the snapshot doesn't have any data, or snapshot.data is null because it's a nullable object. There may not be any data. Then we just return a text that says none. And finally, if everything goes smooth as planned, then for now we'll just return a text field of the actually, let's do this first. We're going to return a list view builder. List view builder, an item builder. We don't need the context for this item builder, but right now we're just going to return the index of our list, and the item count, we'll just say it's 3, just for right now. Just for right now, but we're going to add that in here in a second. Take that out. All right, so now if we log in, all right, as you can see, probably really faint right here, there's this 0, 1, 2 digits. That's because we have this list view builder that are just displaying 3 items right now and the index that they're on. So what we want to do is we want to get those leaderboard records. So we'll create a local variable called leaderboard records, and that's we're going to call our Nakama provider. If we go up top, oh, actually not the Nakama provider, the snapshot.data. Okay, now we'll pass that into the item count, which is going to be the length, leaderboard records, and then add the exclamation mark so it's not nullable. And then we'll just pass in, we'll keep the index for now because we're going to create a widget that we're going to display. So now you can see over here we have 0 and 1 because there's only 2 records in our database right now. So we have those 2. Now what we can do is we're going to create a widget called leaderboard record widget.dart, and actually it's a state list widget, leaderboard record widget, and within here we are going to have a final leaderboard record that will pass in to the constructor. Require this.leaderboard record and import that. Let's see, I think required needs to go before the key. I think this should work. Oh, I got to import the material. All right, that should work so far. And we're just going to return a text right now of the leaderboard record username, dot value. So now we'll come back over here, and instead of returning a text, we'll return that leaderboard record widget and pass in that leaderboard of the index that we're currently on. All right, so let's see what this looks like now. Leaderboard. All right, so now we got Bree and Trey because those were the 2 usernames of the leaderboard records that we have. So let's modify this widget just a little bit. First, I'm gonna create a style up here, a text style, for displaying the score of the record, the rank of the record, and the username of the record. All right, so I'm going to modify this leaderboard record widget to look a little bit more appealing. So I'm going to add a text style up here, a global text style variable called style, text style. And the only thing that we're specifying here right now, font weight bold, and then font size 21. I'm missing something. The value field isn't used. Actually, this would be static const text style. So, all right. Then down here, we're going to be creating a list tile for each record. And list tile is just basically a simple Flutter widget for displaying components in a list view. Essentially like a title, subtitle, a user image. But we're going to modify this one to show, like I said, the rank of the leaderboard record, the username, and then the score of that leaderboard record. So leading is going to be a circle avatar. Background color will be colors.blue. The child will be a text of that leaderboard record rank. and the style will be the style that we specified up top. All right, so now you see that we have leaderboard record over here with 1 and 2. Then we want title to be a container, and we're going to give it a height 30, and the color is going to be white. All right, we got that in there. Then we want a box decoration actually as well, because we don't want those sharp edges. We want kind of like a rounded border. Specify a border and call it border.all, colors.white. Specify the color like that. Okay, I need to take this color out right here because I can't have it in the box decoration as well. And we want to specify the border radius dot circular. We'll do 5. Let's see what 5 looks like. And then within the box decoration, I think I can specify the color here. So we don't want it on the container, we want it on the box decoration. All right, so that's good. Now the child of this container is going to be text, and it's going to be the username of that leaderboard record dot username dot value, and we don't need the brackets actually, so we can take this out. Just do it like this. All right, so we got Bree and Trey in there. We want to change that style to be that style that we specified earlier, but we're going to copy. We just passing the style by itself. Actually, I think that works. No, it doesn't work, because we want to modify this style to be colors.white. To make the 1 and 2 pop out more, we made the text style white. We can make the text style black for when we need it by calling the same style and then copy with, and then specifying the color here to be black. Why does it keep doing amber? All right, there we go. Got Bree and Trey in there, and we actually want to center this because it doesn't look the best right now to the left. So we'll just wrap this in the center widget, make that the child. Oh, not black 12, black. All right, cool. And then last but not least, we just want to add a trailing widget to this list tile, and that's going to be the score. So same thing as before, but instead of the leaderboard rank, we're going to pass in the score. All right, so as you can see, we got first place Bree with 20 points, second place Trey with 0 points. So let's actually try this one more time with everything working. I'm gonna add a little bit of padding to this leaderboard back button. Actually, I'm just gonna wrap this in padding. Edge insets dot all. Actually, we'll just do edge insets symmetric vertical 20. And then the child is going to be that back button. And I got to authenticate again. So we'll log in. Let's log in with Jack this time. Okay. Check out the leaderboard. All right. Got some padding on that back button. Now let's play a game with Jack. All right. Jack did pretty good. He got a score of 29. We should see that new record within our database, but we should even more excitingly see it here on our leaderboard. Codename authenticate message. I'm talking about. Why is it telling me that? Let me log in with Jack again. Okay. Some of the authentication is a little icky, but as you can see here, Jack now passed Bree with 29 points. Bree's in second place now with 20 points, and unfortunately, I'm still in last place with 0 points. But as you can see, the leaderboard and login screens are working perfectly with this Nakama implementation. With all that being said, now you understand just how powerful Nakama actually is. And today, hopefully you got some pretty beneficial tips on how you can, implement something like this. So like I said, today we covered creating and building a Nakama server. We covered actually running the server. We covered building the UI in Flutter, and finally testing the application in its entirety. So hopefully if this video was helpful, as always, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think about Nakama, if you've ever used it, what your opinions on game development, or any other type of backend that might be similar to Nakama that I'm not privy to myself. And as always, if there's anything else that you would like me to cover that's Flutter related or even non-Flutter related, maybe something with databases, maybe something with notifications, whatever it may be sure to leave me a comment. Let me know what else I can tackle or help you understand a little bit better. As always, this is Trey Codes, signing off.